Good evening, and good afternoon. And wherever you are in this wide, wonderful, beautiful world, you are very welcome to the Global Sales Leader Podcast. Every week, I speak to some phenomenal guests from the areas of psychology, sales leadership, coaching, LMS platforms, the areas around sales. For myself, I'm the sales relationship coach. Everything that we do is always about relationships and building those authentic relationships with your customers and with your buyers and with people that you like, trust, and connect with. And that's all part and parcel of sales. Today, I have another phenomenal guest. And I say that every week because I only have phenomenal guests because I like to make sure that we engage with the best people out there. And everything that we do, I want to make sure people that learn and grow from these podcasts. And every element that we do, I know you're going to take some golden nuggets out this one and all the other podcasts that we do. So welcome, Jermany. How are you doing today?
Jason, hey, thanks for having me on your show. I'm assuming you're out of Ireland somewhere?
I live in Ireland, but I'm English. So
Well, that's what I thought. For some reason, you just had an Irish vibe to you. When I was the reason why I asked you that, when I was 19, I actually lived over in Dublin, part of part of Belfast, and Coleraine in Portrush up in
cool,
Northern
Rain. I know
Ireland.
it very well.
Where are you at in Ireland?
I live in South County Dublin. So what brought you
South.
over to Ireland?
I served a mission for my church there for 2 years when I was a kid and I actually lived down in City Center, down by Trinity University. You're probably pretty familiar with that place. So that was one of the best times of my life. Met a lot of awesome people. Went to every castle, every historic church I could see. I think it's amazing, the history of that country for sure.
Yeah, it is phenomenal. I'm quite lucky here because everyone's quite nice, everyone's quite friendly in
Yeah.
majority. But since
Yeah.
you've popped over there, it's all changed. It's all high tech now. Google's here, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of the big tech companies there have a European EMEA hub. I'm doing some work with Google here as well. I contract in and do sales processes and all of that. So, look, it's not always about me; it's about you today. So, tell me what how you got into sales, and then a little bit of in brief where you are and where you are today and what you're doing today.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll do this. I'm going to bore everybody on here, but I'll give you a little bit of my background because I think my background relates to really, I would say, what is necessary for a sales professional to take their income to a new level that maybe they never thought they could. So I got into sales about 21 years ago, broke, burned out college student. Okay. And I got my first job. It was actually after I got back from Ireland, believe it or not. I was about 21, almost 22. And I got my first job selling home security systems door to door. Okay. Company basically hires everybody. Yeah, they hire everybody because it's straight commission. What do they have to lose, right? Give you a script, drive you out in a van, drop you off and a bunch of people off in a neighborhood and basically say, hey, go make some sales. We'll pick you up after dark. And that's really how my career started. Looking back at it, I thought it was going to be easy because that's what everybody told me. Was the people that recruited me said, it's going to be easy. You're going to make all this money and you're going to make enough money in the summer where you don't have to work, where you go to college, you get your degree, blah, 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 blah. And I still remember the sales manager training us. Hey, when they open the door, you got to be really excited. Like you got to show how enthusiastic you are about the product. And if you show them how much you believe in the product, they're going to believe in you and they're going to believe in the product and they're just going to want to buy. And I found out from the very first store that necessarily wasn't the case because I started getting lots of objections like, we don't need it. We can't afford it. We already use a company for that. We don't have the budget for that this month. I need to talk to my spouse. I need to think it over. Can you call me back a week, a month, a year later, right? And I remember probably, I don't know, 7-8 weeks into going through all that nonstop rejection, hardly making any sales. Remember, straight commission. As you know, you don't make a sale, you don't make anything. I remember probably about 2 months in, you know, waiting for the sales manager to pick us up in the van one evening. You know, I remember you know, it's crazy. Like, it's in the summer here, so it's all hot and humid, but the sweat was like dripping down my shirt. I remember one day in particular, I was about to be picked up, and I had made 0 sales for that day. I'd worked 12 hours, made $0. And I remember that week I had worked like probably 70 hours and made 0 sales. So talk about, you know, what are you going to do at that point? And I remember at that point thinking, like, you know, maybe sales just wasn't for me. Right. So if anybody has ever got to that point in your life, that's where I was at as this kid. And I remember when the manager picked me up, he did something that quite literally kind of changed everything for me. There were some other aspects, but this was the starting point. He popped in a CD, because yes, 20 years ago, people listened to CDs. And Tony Robbins, you know, the guru, said something.
I've seen him twice.
Yeah, I might be butchering what he said, but he said most people fail for the simple reason they don't learn the right skills that are necessary to succeed. They don't learn the right skills. Now, he actually goes on to say that everybody's taught skills, but the people who fail are the ones who are not taught the right ones. And it was like something like this light bulb went off in my head, that maybe, just maybe, what the company was training me and what I was learning from what I now call the old sales gurus, maybe they just weren't the right skills. Maybe they just were outdated, didn't work very well anymore. So that kind of put me on a path of really discovering what the right skills actually meant. And at the same time, I was learning from the gurus. I was actually in college, and my degree, what I was studying was behavioral science and human psychology, right? And my professors were teaching us that the most persuasive way to get somebody to move over to your way of thinking, because they don't call it sales, was over here. Whereas all the sales gurus I was reading was telling me it was completely over here. So it was at complete odds. And so I'm like, okay, how do I take the theory of behavioral science and interject that into a sales process? Okay. And I started learning from human psychology how to get prospects to start pulling me in where I didn't have to push. And once I really started to understand how human beings work, the way the brain works, selling became very, very easy and very, very profitable. And that's kind of where it all started for me. But bunch of boring stuff a long time ago.
Yeah. No, exactly. I can see that, because it's quite congruent with my journey as well. Mine was fairly similar. I went on a very bad sales course, and the sales trainer was banging his ruler on the table. That's wrong. Intimidating you, embarrassing you in front of everyone. This is how you do it, blah, blah, blah. And then I just went, this was selling photocopiers in the 90s. And that's not right. I learned exactly the same way as brain science, human psychology, behavioral economics, body language, what goes on. And I'm still learning because I love it, but how to make an impact. So I'm curious, before I go into that, what's that record behind you?
That is an award.
Before we go into Congress, I'm just curious. Yeah, I'm curious about that behind you. And for the audio listeners.
Yeah, so that's an award.
Far away for the audio listeners. Jeremy has a looks like a piece of vinyl behind him, but Jeremy, explain to me what that actually is.
No, it's a whole record. So that is an award that we won by a global organization for being a multiple 8-figure company at this point. So we won that last year. And this one award over here, I don't know if you can see it, the Inc. 5000. We won that award last year, and we are ranked by Inc. because I'm a contributor for Inc. magazine now, but we were ranked by Inc. as the #1 fastest growing sales training company in the United States last year. And I think we're on pace to actually get that this year too. So we've doubled what we did last year. So things helping a lot of clients. So that's always good for us for sure.
Awesome. It's good to see that as well. And it's good to show that off. So what were you doing differently to anyone else? So what made you win that? and what were the ideas and the thoughts behind that put you ahead? Because it's all about learning of growth. It's all about making a difference. And if you can make a difference, share some of the secrets about that.
Well, I think the difference would be the methodology. So typically, I guess other sales training companies, and like, I don't know everybody throughout the world and stuff, but typically people here in the United States, and even, we got clients in like 37 different countries, but typically, it's more traditional sales training and methodologies and beliefs, more like consultative selling or boiler room selling compared to what we do. And it actually might help if I do this. I'll break it down in 3 different levels, and I won't give the behavioral science terms. I'll just kind of give it like most of your listeners would probably understand, being professional salespeople and entrepreneurs themselves. So according to behavioral science, there are actually 3 forms of communication, and you probably know this just as well as I do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think, if you're listening to us right now, if you're not driving, write these down, because once you understand the differences in where you're at right now, the differences in persuasion compared to where you're at now in your own sales ability compared to where you could be, even if you're doing good, will completely change everything for everybody listening. So the first mode of communication is known as era 1 type of sales. Now, there's a scientific term to it, but I'm going to give it a term that most people can associate that with, and that would be more like boiler room selling. So when I say boiler room selling, what's the first image? What's the first thing that goes through most people's mind? Wolf of Wall Street. You know what I mean by that, right? So think boiler room selling, Wolf of Wall Street. Hey, I've got a great opportunity for you. And then we talk about the features and benefits of what we do. And then we push them and tell them why they need to buy,
blah,
or
blah, blah, blah.
why they need to go with this, because we got the best this, we got the best that. And it's just like if you tell your spouse that they really, really need to do something for you, and then you keep pushing them, well, what do they typically do back? They push back.
Go the other way.
It's just human behavior 101. So here are the least persuasive ways to sell. Okay, so number one, boiler room selling, presenting. See, we're all taught from a very early on age in sales that you have to have a great presentation, all the slide decks, show them how great your services and products are, show them a picture of your corporate office and your customer service awards and all the clients you have. We have the best this, we have the best that. Which, by the way, doesn't every single salesperson or company say they have the best product or service?
And at the end of the day, who cares? Who cares?
Your prospects don't, because they hear everybody say the same thing, right? I mean, how many salespeople come up and sell to you and be like, yeah, we have the 5th best product in the market? Nobody. Everybody says they're the best. So when we say things like that we have the best this, we have the best that, our owners are the best, blah, 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 and we talk down about our competition, your prospects psychologically actually trust you far less. And why? Because they're used to every salesperson saying that, okay? So according to the data, it's not very persuasive if your presentation is more than 10% of your entire sales cycle or process. The average salesperson presents about half of the time. We have to really lower that down to about 10%. It's more discovery and getting them to persuade themselves. Telling your story, that's also part of that. Hate to tell you this, like you just said, nobody cares about your story when you're selling one-to-one. Whose story do they care about?
Absolutely.
Their story, right?
Yes, they all care about themselves. It's all about the customer. It's not about you, not about your ego. It's all about the customer. It's all about them, never about you. You're there as an instigator along the line somewhere, but you don't know what the challenge or the problem is because you haven't spoken to them. You haven't asked them any questions.
You're just a facilitator taking on this journey, right? The journey where you're taking them to solve their problems and get where they want. Giving a sales pitch. Everybody say, hey, you got to give a great pitch, but according to the data, not very persuasive. Like, if you ever watch Shark Tank on CNBC?
No.
Okay, so if you ever watch Shark Tank, big show over here in the US on CNBC, you'll see that when the entrepreneurs come out and they start pitching the sharks, the investors, like Damon John,
like
Mark
Dragon's
Cuban,
Den over here.
Yeah, okay. I know you guys have a little bit of a different version over in the UK in that area, but I want you, even that version, watch when the entrepreneurs start pitching, watch the body language of the sharks, how turned off they get. Okay. So you want to be careful with that. We even have shirts for our clients that say hashtag ditch the pitch now. So hashtag ditch the pitch. And the big one, assuming the sale, according to the data, very low on the persuasive poll. And that's especially if you're, as you know, more of a complex sound environment that requires multiple calls and touches. Now that's the first mode. The second mode of communication, era 2, is more known as, I'll kind of give the easiest way to describe it, more as consultative selling. Everybody knows what's that, especially if you've ever been in like a B2B complex sound environment, right? So we're more persuasive when we attempt to have a discussion. Consultative selling came out really in the 80s. One of the biggest books.
Yeah, that was Mike Bosworth that started that. I've actually had him as a guest on my show, but the way he's done it now is slightly different. That was him in the 80s, Mike Bosworth, that invented consultative selling. But what he's done now is a lot different to that back then. That was in the 80s. That's not 2020.
That's right. Prospects have definitely changed for sure. Buying behaviors for sure. But, big books like Spin Selling, Neil Rackham, professors, they all taught consultative selling. And that was, hey, you need to ask questions. You need to ask logical-based questions to find out the needs of the clients. We call those surface level questions. Yep. What's the problem with that, though? When you ask logical-based questions, your prospects are going to give you what type of answers? Logical answers,
which is the neocortex rather than the emotional systems.
Yeah. And so when we only get logical based surface level answers, the problem is, do human beings base their buying decisions on logic or emotion? Emotion, as we know, brain studies prove that. Okay. So if we're still using questions like, what's keeping you awake at night? Or can you tell me 2 problems that you have the most? Or who besides you would be involved in this decision? We have to change it. We have to change the wording. So instead of saying, like, as an example, well, who besides you would be involved in the decision? I can just relanguage that. And I could say, John, can you walk me through your company's decision-making process when it comes to solving problems like this? So walk me through it. It goes below the surface. And then we can clarify and probe off of that to go even deeper into the surface. Okay. So more persuasive than boiler room selling. But we're still having to play the numbers game with consultative selling because you're bringing very little emotion out of simply asking logical-based questions, okay? Yeah. Now, the third mode of selling, okay, we call that era 3 type of sales. We are the most persuasive when we allow others to persuade themselves. That's more known as what we would call dialogue, when we ask what are called neuro-emotional persuasion questions. That stands for NEPQ. Okay. So the question is, how do you get somebody to persuade themselves? That's like the $1 billion question. You just show up and say, Mr. Prospect, go ahead and persuade yourself. And here's our wire details. No, right? You have to learn specific skilled questions, when and how to ask them. The right tonality, the right verbal pausing, and a step-by-step structure that gets your prospects to pull you in and sell themselves rather than you trying to do it. So era 3 NEPQ is a methodology that we trademarked, or I trademarked from my background in behavioral science and human psychology. Bunch of boring science stuff.
No, I love that because I'm fascinated by that area, and I learn huge amounts of that. But it is, whatever happens, regardless of a process, whatever process that people have, it's emotions. We buy an emotions and then we back it up by facts and figures. So the limbic system, which is the emotional area of the brain, that's the thing that lights up. Our mirror neurons actually get visualizing having the product or seeing the product, actually having it. Then the other person can make a story or a narrative out of that in their own.
Well, you got to get them to visualize the end result, right? Because as you know, you're not selling the thing, you're selling the results of what that thing does.
Yeah.
Right. So once, as a sales professional or as a business owner, once your salespeople understand that they are not selling the thing, you're not selling the life insurance policy, you're not selling the car, you're not selling the yacht, you're not selling the cybersecurity software, you're selling the results of what those things do for the prospect, what problems they solve, and what end result to get them to their objectives those things do them. Major difference in your commissions once everybody understands that, for sure.
Yeah, there is a slight difference in that. And ironically enough, someone rang me up the other day, and it was my insurance guy. And do you know what he did? He annoyed them. crap out of me within the first 5 seconds. Do you know what he did? He just talked at me. He didn't ask me anything.
Yeah.
And I was so bored, I put the phone away from me like that. And I carried on the conversation elsewhere. Then I got back. I said, yeah, have you finished yet? And he carried on. I said, look, understand this. Firstly, you're speaking to someone that is a sales trainer, sales coach, and blah, blah, blah. And you're talking at me. Can I help you for a second? And I twisted the conversation around because I just didn't like the way it was done to me. And talking at people, which is the 1980s approach, hopefully they'll submit, but they don't.
Yeah,
So,
you have no control over that sales process. That's what we call product pushing, where you hope and pray that something you're going to say is just going to magically trigger the prospect to want to buy. It's like taking a bucket of mud and like throwing it up against the wall. And I hope and pray that something I just said to Jason is going to stick in Jason's brain and he's just going to want to buy. You know, I call that hopium. It's a drug that so many salespeople take. Don't do drugs, kids. Drugs are not good for you.
Yeah, it's that dopamine hit. Trying to get more dopamine hits. Try and get it in a rewarding way that you get the dopamine hit that you've actually got the sell, as opposed to throwing stuff at the wall and go, hey, hopefully something will stick.
Yeah, you have to, instead of being a product pusher, this is a good subject to talk to you about. You want to get away from product pushing because that's what average salespeople do. I would say below average salespeople are product pushers in 2022. Yeah. You have to get better at what we call problem finding. Now, you have to be a problem solver. But the problem is, I mean, every book back here on the shelf is going to tell you got to be good at problem solving. But if they don't buy, you can't solve their problems. So in our mind, you have to be much better at problem finding. And that means helping your prospects find problems that they don't realize they even have. Because when we first start talking to most of our prospects, even if it's an inbound lead, let alone outbound, okay, most of them don't even understand that they have a problem. Or maybe they understand they have a problem, but they don't know how bad the problem really is. Or maybe they don't understand what the consequences are of not doing anything about solving the problem. What are the ramifications? Now, once you learn advanced questioning and advanced tonality, not only are you able to help your prospects find one problem, but you can also help them find 2 or 3 or 4 other problems that they didn't even know or realize they had. And when you're able to do that, not by telling them, you tell them what their problems are, it's in one ear, out the other, because you're biased. You're the salesperson. But by your questioning, allows them to tell themselves what their real problems are. You're the facilitator. And when you're able to do that, how do your prospects start to view you? They view you as the expert, as the trusted authority, whereas they view all these other salespeople as just another salesperson trying to stuff their solution down their throat, like your insurance guy. And so with those type of people, you try to get rid of them very quickly because they trigger fight or flight mode. When you start to learn how to become a problem finder, your prospects start to chase you down because you have massive value for them.
Ironically enough, I was on, I do a lot of Clubhouse and I facilitate a few on there. But we were talking the other day is they were talking about, oh, we have to get back to selling again. It's all been too easy. It's never been easy. So are you an order taker? And I was going, oh my God, where is this conversation going? I don't think I've ever had the luxury of being an order taker. The only way I'd ever see as an order taker so well in your organization, or you're doing so well with a client that you are a trusted advisor. And they call you up when there is a problem or challenge because they know you're an expert at what you do. They help solve problems. That's when you're an order taker, but you still have to work with.
But that's only going to get you to a certain level. It's only going to get you to a certain level. Absolutely. Those are lay down sales. That's like 5% of the market, if that. Look, you want to be a top salesperson, make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in commissions or more, or if you want to be a business owner and double, triple, quadruple your revenue and profit margin, what's gotten you here, that sales process, how would it ever get you here? It wouldn't. You couldn't, right? It's not like your salespeople can work twice as much. They're already working 8 to 10 hours a day. They're going to work 20 hours a day, right? So we have to learn advanced skills because, in times of economic contraction,
Yep.
like it looks like we're about to enter in now, if we haven't already.
Apparently. Yeah.
Every shortcoming in your sales process, in your ability, will only be magnified by 10. And it's going to become much harder to sell because you're going to get way less laydowns because your prospects are going to get tighter with their funds.
Yeah.
So what happens if you don't learn advanced skill sets and advanced questioning to get you to a higher level when the economy starts to contract? You just make a lot less money.
Yeah.
Worse off, you don't help your prospects. And if you can't sell to your prospects, you can't solve their problems and you can't get them where they want to go, and they stay in status quo and nothing ever changes for them. And that is your responsibility as a sales professional, not theirs.
Absolutely. There still are people out there, regardless of the 2009 financial crisis, that were still selling phenomenally well. There were still people in 2000, the dot-com bust boom, whatever, in 2001, 2002, still selling high level. What were they doing differently? Whether it's old school technique, I think it's just proper good.
Just
problem
finders. They just knew, they learn advanced skills because every prospect they're talking to still have problems, and sometimes even worse problems because of an economic contraction. So sometimes their problems have gotten even worse. But when you get on and then you get off after you don't make a sale, you're like, oh, they just have a bunch of fear and fear-based mindset. Well, no shit, Sherlock. It's your job as the sales professional to help them overcome their fears and to help them gain certainty in what you're offering. It's not their responsibility. It's your responsibility. That's why you get paid commissions, is to help them overcome that way of thinking that's keeping them in the status quo. That's your job.
Right place, right. So, Jeremy, if you were interviewing you, what would you say to yourself?
What would I say to myself if I interviewed myself? Okay, there must be something behind that question. I have to know.
No, so the reason is it's a holistic approach here. So imagine you were sitting next to you and you were talking to yourself, but you were interviewing yourself. What question would you ask yourself?
About what subject? What do you mean? You got to give me more background here, man.
In a sales context, we're in a sales environment. You're interviewing you, and we're doing this podcast on sales. What sort of questions would you ask yourself, Jeremy?
Well, hopefully I'm answering the question the way you want it, because I'm not sure of the background of your question. But if I'm interviewing myself about how to build a sales team or to manage a sales team or how to sell more, there's probably different questions I'm going to ask, but I'll just give you one in particular. Let's say that I'm interviewing myself about how to build a sales process for my individual salespeople. I would probably, one of the first questions I would ask would be, let's pretend that I came to work for you today. What would my sales training look like as a new rep? That's probably one of the first questions I'd ask for sure. Hopefully that's what you're asking me.
It's not a trick question. No, not really. It's a question to ask yourself about yourself and about you within your business, your environment. So what would the number one critical question that you would ask yourself?
What was the number one critical question I'd ask myself about sales? Gosh, I'm drawing a blank because I'm not sure what's behind your question or what you're looking for. You're going to have to be more specific there.
So let me be more specific. We're doing this podcast all about global sales leadership.
Yes.
And what I want you to do is take a slightly different approach to a question. Is question to ask yourself. A question to ask yourself if you were interviewing yourself about
sales. No, I get that.
And it's an unusual question.
Would I ask myself, who's a sales trainer?
Yeah. What would you ask yourself?
I'd probably ask myself, where do you see your company going in the next 10 years? How about that?
Awesome. Ask yourself that question then.
Well, there you go. Where do I see myself going in the next 10 years? So we're scaling towards 9 figures a year in revenue. And that means once we get to that point, we help, tens of thousands more clients than we are right now. So with us, the more the more clients we help, the larger we grow. And that's the way it should be, right? As any business owner, the more clients you help, the more results you get for your clients, the bigger you should get. That should be normal.
Awesome. Like slightly off cue today. You got a lot of books behind you. What's the number one one book that you'd say, this is absolutely awesome? I love this book to death. I've read it so many times. Doesn't have to be in sales. It can be anywhere around that.
Yeah. No, I've read about 5 books a month times 22 years. So it's about 1,400 books on persuasion and influence. These are just a handful back here, some of my favorite ones. Yeah. But I think one good book that really helps you if you're an individual salesperson or a business owner, before you learn any tactical advanced selling skills, you first have to understand what salespeople's biggest problem is in our day and age. And that problem is the problem that you don't know you have. Mm-hmm. What's your biggest problem in sales? Well, it's the problem that you don't know you have. Because if you don't know what your problem is, then how do you ever change what a problem is that you don't even know about, right? So one good book that really will break down how buying behaviors have changed rapidly, even in the last decade, is a book called To Sell is Human by Daniel Pink. Daniel Pink, Sell is Human, a psychologist. Yeah. Really good book that breaks down how buying behaviors have radically changed over the last probably even 5 to 10 years. And once you understand that, you become more open to looking at selling from a much different perspective, more from a perspective of putting yourself in your buyer's shoes, rather than, as my good friend Jerry Acuff would say, stop acting like a seller and start thinking like a buyer. And once you understand the psychological difference in that, your sales results will be, times 10 compared to what you're getting right now. So I would say that's a really good book for that background for sure.
I must reread that one again. I haven't read it for about a year or so, but I'll have to get back on there. I think my most recent one this year is Sapiens. I love Sapiens. Don't know if you've ever read it. About the history of humankind. It tells you all sorts about humans and how we are and how we interact and cultures, and phenomenal. It taught me so much stuff I didn't even know. It's going, wow, I've learned something really absolutely awesome. So talking about awesome, how can people find out more about you, Jeremy?
Yeah, sure. The best place to learn, like, especially because we didn't have time to really get into like any tactical training, like what questions should you ask then? And if they say this, how would you respond to that? And how, what should you ask here? So if you want to learn like tactical skills, not just like theory, like we've talked about, I just have them join our free Facebook group. They can go to salesrevolution.pro. So should have a link here, www.salesrevolution.pro. Right when we got about 25,000 people in there. We just started that about a year ago. They're all sales professionals like you guys, entrepreneurs who want to sell more. Right when you join, somebody on my team, check your messages on Facebook, because right when you join, somebody on my team will message you over a free training called the NEPQ 101 mini course. And it's a list of different questions that you can use for any different sales situation you're in. It's done by my CEO, Matt Ryder. And he'll break that down, the NEPQ sales process, and give you some different questions that you can go out today and use to start selling more of your product and services. Mm-hmm. And we go live in the Facebook group 3 to 4 times a week with different trainings, different Q&A. So they're welcome to join salesrevolution.pro if they want to learn how to sell more for sure.
I shall put that in when I release this podcast. I'll put all the links in there so people can find a little bit more about you. That's always good. And obviously you're on Forbes, Inc., Wall Street Journal, Entrepreneur Magazine, and so on and so forth. So that's
we have a new book. We have a new book that will be released this fall. It's called The New Model of Selling to an Unsellable Generation. The audio book is being released this fall. It will be in bookstores, Barnes & Noble, and every bookstore near everybody listening on here, January of 2023.
Excellent. Something to look forward to. Another book to read and to learn.
Another book, right?
Wonderful stuff. Another awesome book to read. So something else to put on there. Basically, at that time, I'll have you back on and we'll talk about that. Maybe we'll do a LinkedIn Live or something like that. So look, Jeremy, it's been absolutely awesome speaking with you. I know we didn't go to lots of big subjects today, but maybe we'll have you back and we'll talk in other areas and some more granular subjects, because this is fascinating for me as well as it is for you. We both like to talk about it, and I think it's absolutely awesome. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on. The book is also, I got to throw my co-author out there. So it's co-authored by me and a good friend of mine named Jerry Acuff, which is the CEO of Delta Point Consulting, a pretty large sales training firm over here on the East Coast. So we wrote it together, and he'd be a good person to have on your show as well. He probably has 15 of the largest companies in the United States as his clients, Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson, some of the big boys for sure.
Brilliant. Well, we'll speak afterwards about that. So thank you. You've been listening to the Global Sales Leader podcast. I'm your host, Jason Cooper. Every week we speak to phenomenal people on different aspects of the sales process, the psychology behind it, human behavior, coaching elements, L&D as well, and a bit of technology. So we'll speak all about that. And again, thank you so much.
Jason, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.